Maybe you should babysit a married couple who has kids just to give you a fresh reality check. Every season has its challenges. I know when Pauline and I were believing for God to bring us a house, that's one thing we tried to do often because we were in a small apartment.
900 square feet.
Less than that. 841.
Excuse me.
And give me credit for all the inches I didn't have. What's up, fam? Welcome back to our channel. My name is Tim. This is my beautiful wife, Pauline, and you're tuning in to another episode of the W Podcast, where you get wisdom and a word with the
Wheelers.
Hey, so we are super excited to be back this week. We have a really good topic, kind of on the heels of Valentine's Day weekend. For some people, we're going to address something that maybe they experienced over the weekend. And then for people who were in Valentine's Day, meaning they had a date, they were celebrating it, navigating that as you lead up to marriage and what that looks like. I know you kind of had a better way of phrasing that.
No, you did great. I didn't think about it related to Valentine's Day, but yeah, today we're talking all about guarding your heart when you are single, as you're waiting for a relationship, as you're believing God for that.
Well, really is how we are phrasing this week's episode is guarding your heart when you're dating and guarding your hope when you're single.
Okay.
That's what you were going to say?
I was going to say that, but I didn't.
You said guarding your heart when you're single.
It's really the same, though, because guarding your heart against bitterness and against fear.
But the play on word.
Anyway. So guarding your hope when you are single, waiting for God to bring or for you to meet the person that you want to marry, date first, then marry, and then also guarding your heart when you are in a relationship so that you don't get hurt or not more hurt than what's necessary. You can't prevent pain, of course, all the way on this side of heaven. So yeah, we're talking about that. I think that that's really important because, number one, chances are you've gotten your heart broken before. If you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, obviously the older you are, the more opportunity you have to get hurt and go through heartbreak, whether you were disappointed by somebody and you ended the relationship, whether you've been divorced, whether you were the one who got broken up with. Someone broke up with you. Have you been broken up with before?
Technically.
I've
only been well, actually no. Anyway, yeah.
Okay.
Let's just keep it at that. I've had some stories.
If you've been heartbroken before and been gravely disappointed, you know how badly that stinks, and you don't want to go through that again, whether you were with the Lord, in your dating kind of process before or not. But even if you have never been heartbroken before, if you're always the one to do all the breaking up, you don't want to waste your time. Nobody likes wasting their time. The older you get, the busier you get, the more important and valuable your time and your energy are, and you're really not trying to waste that in a relationship. So whether you are single or you are in a dating relationship currently, or even if you're engaged, we have some nuggets for you today.
Yeah, so obviously a lot of you know the verse that really is going to spark today, which is Proverbs 4:23. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. And obviously we think about that when it comes to our spiritual life and making sure that we guard our heart from seeing things or doing things that could cause us to be out of God's presence. But that also applies for your dating life and your singleness, and just making sure that you're protecting your heart in those times too, because I feel like you get to a point where you realize protecting your heart is just as important as protecting your purity.
Yeah.
Like at some point in your Christian walk, you get to that point where it's like, all right, I got to protect my purity, because also when you get married, you still need to protect your purity, because you can still taint it when you're married. I heard a crazy clip today from this woman who was saying that she been married to her husband for like 13 years, and she's been having an affair for pretty much all of it. He thinks that they have a happy marriage, and she had the nerve to say, how do I convince my husband to let me keep the affair? That's so off track right now, but I meant to tell you that earlier. But that's...
Let me keep. He wasn't letting you do anything.
Right. So the whole point is purity has nothing to do with your stage of relationship status.
And also, purity is not just not, having sex when you're not married. It's about having a clean heart towards the Lord, overall and in general, in all areas of your life.
Right. But this episode is not about purity. But I brought it up to say we can get so focused on our purity that we drop our guards too low in other areas, whether it be spiritually, emotionally, and obviously physically when you're dating.
Even financially.
Yeah. And if you're with somebody whose love language is physical touch, I could see it being harder when you're dating because they may feel like, I don't feel like I can express my love to you. Like, I love you, but I can't touch you in a way that will show you how I love you. And that may cause them to overgive emotionally too soon because they're like, well, I ain't got nothing else, so I got to give it here. And then you set yourself up potentially for failure by giving yourself too soon, and then things don't work out, and then you're feeling unnecessary heartbreak. Because obviously, to some degree, everybody's going to experience heartbreak if a relationship doesn't work out. Yeah. But there's levels.
Right. I mean, you could be
there's levels to heartbreak for sure. And I respect that this may seem hard. The act of balancing trying to get to know somebody and grow my intimacy with them, but then at the same time being mindful of where we are in a relationship and guarding it. Yeah. Do you see how that could be kind of tricky?
Yeah, of course. Especially when all you know is one certain way of dating and realizing, like, okay, I'm a Christian now, so that just means we don't have sex, right? Or we don't have sex before marriage. And that's not all that there is, to that. It's not just about not having sex. So much of dating for people is sex and sexual chemistry. And when you eliminate that, but you don't know how else to connect and then to connect appropriately, because some people, we live in a day and age where living together is very common in the dating stage. And that being a way of not just having sexual access, but also getting to know the person, observing them, sharing space, sharing like physical space. But if you're not at that, if that's not, part of your dating schema or like strategy anymore, it can feel like, okay, well, I don't really know how else to connect. I don't really know how else to get to know you. Sometimes it can be very black and white.
So I know I was your first Christian relationship.
Yes.
Was that something that you struggled with, or did you feel like you kind of already knew how to have emotional boundaries with me? Especially early on.
So, what was one of the wisest things that I did that I fully give I fully give credit to the Holy Spirit.
Not playing my birthdays?
I know you felt the way about that.
That was one of her boundaries.
It was an emotional boundary, and I'm glad I did it. But was taking 4 years in college, my whole undergrad time, and not dating, not having a boyfriend, not even really pursuing and entertaining guys at that time, because it gave me so much space to invest into friendships and learning how to connect with people on a platonic way and building those skills. I think that did prepare me, and I didn't do it so that I would get a boyfriend one day. It was like, this is I knew that relationships and guys were like a big stronghold for me in an area that I was looking for like security and identity, that I needed to not look for it in that way and in that area. So I need to take a break. And I think that like it was a very large area of brokenness and pain for me. And being able to set that aside allowed healing and freedom to come for me. So I think that's why I was able to, kind of go into it with this very strict, very high kind of standard, I guess, of emotional boundaries, and guarding my heart, because I had guarded my heart for 4 years. Before then, I kind of maybe looked at you and this potential relationship at the time. I was like, all right, I'm not going to let this guy and the excitement of what could be mess up all the work I just did the past 4 years. But if you don't take the time to be single for a while, sometimes it's like, why wouldn't I be as close to this person as I possibly can? Because you have nothing to... If you don't look at your heart as something to protect or something that's valuable, you may not see the point in trying to guard it or protect it.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things we want to do in this episode is get practical on how to actually try to do this as far as opening up emotionally to your partner, but doing it at a healthy pace. Because, and we'll just start with people who are dating currently, or when you do date one day, you don't want to share your deepest, darkest secrets, or your deepest, darkest, or not darkest, but your biggest dreams with your partner too soon. Like first date, second date, third date, whatever. Like you don't want to get too into sharing some of those things, because they need to prove that they're worthy of receiving that information. And I say that because depending on the context of when you met them, how long you've known them, you don't know them and you don't know how they'll handle that information. And I have some good signs and some bad signs, because what you want to do is a slow drip, a slow leak of sharing your dreams and your fears with somebody, and then seeing how they react. And I feel like that's the best practical way, is little by little opening it up. So some bad signs: if you tell somebody information and they don't essentially handle it well, these are some signs that you can look for that will let you know this person, you may not be able to trust them with your heart. The first thing is, obviously, they tell other people your business. So they're the only person you told, and yet somehow everybody knows what you did or what you think. That's obviously a red flag. The second thing is, do they laugh at what you tell them, or do they ignore your concerns? I don't know.
Do they think you're funny?
No.
Like
they're literally laughing at you.
Vulnerable.
Like, oh, you think that's a cool, or you think that's scary, or you think that's dumb. Like, they're kind of not taking you serious. And we had conversations with people in the past where somebody has shared, like, oh, this is my dream blank. And the partner or the person that they're interested in kind of laughs, is like, oh, you think that's cool, or you think that's scary. And it's like, actually, yeah, I did. So being with somebody who can take you seriously, who can respect what you may say, because we all have things that may be weird to other people. Like there's things that you do or things that I do that we've learned to accept, or I guess accept is the best word for one another.
Respect.
Yeah. And there's other people who wouldn't. Who would be like, you're doing too much.
So that's why, like you said, there's levels to it, because if you're telling, it's not, a lot of times if you tell somebody, oh, my biggest fear is not realizing, not becoming financially stable, and you tell them that on the first or second date without a lot of context to how you grew up and, what you've worked so hard for all this time and all those different things as to why that is a big fear for you and how that became true, your relationship cannot handle that type of information. And it's not because that person is mean or rude or immature. It's just the fact of, like, they haven't built up that muscle, and they don't have, it's kind of like when you put the cart before the horse type of thing. Like, they may be able to handle it if you tell them at, the 6th date or the 10th date, but the 2nd or 3rd date, they haven't laughed enough with you. They haven't had enough, context as to who you are right now for you to dump this big thing on, oh, this happened to me 15 years ago.
Yeah, well, I think what you said is really good, and I don't want y'all to miss that, is context matters.
Yeah.
And I think whether it's a friend that you may have or it's a sibling, you know things about them where you may have more empathy for them.
Right.
Whereas somebody else would see the same things and actions that they're doing and be like, what's wrong with them?
Right,
but
exactly.
You know why they are the way they are. And I think that's one of the reasons why God doesn't like us judging people. Yeah. This is kind of a sidetrack. But God has all the context on every person and what they've been through. But when we judge somebody, we have no idea what may have caused them to think the way they think, act the way they act. And it's just really a dangerous situation. That's kind of a side note. But the last bad sign that I really think you should be mindful of is, do they tell you other people's business? Because maybe they've never shared your business before, but if they're telling you other people's business,
they're telling your business too.
There's a high chance that they're telling your business.
Yeah.
And honestly, you got to ask yourself, do I even want to be with somebody, even if they aren't telling my business, do I want to be with somebody who gossips?
Yeah.
The Lord does not.
Because that's going to
like
affect
gossiping.
their reputation, and if you're associated with them, those are, because those, so, and also I love that you put those under, like bad signs to guard your heart, because if you are seeing these things, like, it eventually is going to end up hurting you and hurting their relationship. And essentially, you know, you may be in a place where, you know, they're great, but they do these 3 things. It's going to eventually, you know, lead you to disappointment and considering, like, do I want to be with somebody who's like this? And we don't want you to, of course, we want you to get in a relationship that, not just to be in a relationship, but one that's going to lead to marriage, and not just lead to marriage, but lead to a marriage that's going to last. I saw this terribly, it was so, I shouldn't have laughed because the situation itself was sad, but this guy was talking about a couple that he knew, a wedding that he attended, where the couple got divorced 2 months after the wedding. And he was like, when am I getting my toaster back that I bought you guys? Like, you obviously didn't use it, you don't need it, I want it back. Yeah. That's not funny, but it is. But it's so true because, you know, just because you get married, like, literally the work begins after the wedding. So it's not, you know, that's not our heart for you guys. It's just to, like, oh, hurry up and find somebody to date and date as, you know, efficiently as you can. Like, no, all these steps matter because they're going to show up in your actual marriage where you actually do the work.
Yeah. So some good signs, if you're dating somebody or whenever you are dating somebody in the future, what are some good signs to see, can they be trusted with my heart? The first thing is they keep what you tell them to themselves. Pretty obvious, right? The second thing, though, which is big, is they validate your feelings, big or small. So you tell them something and they don't say you're crazy, they don't say you're weird. Their first reaction is either I'm sorry that happened to you, or thank you for sharing, or I can understand or see why you feel that way. Even if they may not agree with you, can they validate the fact that you feel the way you feel?
Yeah, because that shows selflessness, to be able to step into somebody else's shoes and say, like, oh, and you do this really well all the time, of like, okay, I can see why you would say that. I personally that wouldn't be my reaction or my concern, but if I can step out of my own, you know, feelings and my own perspective, my own world view for a second and pretend that I'm you and say, like, okay, yeah, that's a reasonable response. Like, it is very validating because it makes that other person not feel alone. And that's one of the best pieces of marriage advice that I ever heard was, you know, as a spouse, it's my goal to not make my other spouse feel alone, and validating feelings is one of the easiest, most consistent ways to not make your partner feel alone.
Yeah, and the third thing kind of ties into that, but they make you feel safe to open up. Like, they encourage you to talk. It's not like, oh, we got to talk again, but it's like, yeah, please tell me more. Like, oh, I remember you mentioned this last time we talked. Does this tie into this at all? Or how did that affect this? Like, them asking probing questions, not feeling like an FBI interrogation, but like somebody who's genuinely curious to get to know you. Because at the end of the day, when you're dating somebody, that's the whole point, right? Is to get to know each other, to see, is this somebody I want to spend the rest of my life with? So again, you want to be dripping information little by little, and as they're showing you that they can validate your feelings, as they're showing you that they can make you feel safe to open up more, then that's how you can feel trust and be able to share something else again, and then share something else again after that.
Yeah. And I'll share my 3 points for dating when you're in the dating stage, and then we'll get into the single, like how to guard your hope as a single person. So these are 3 things that I actually used that helped me a lot when we were dating and before we got married. And the first one I used before you as well. But the first one was to not assume that anybody likes you or doesn't like you. Don't assume anything. If he's holding the door for you, or if he texts you a lot, and that was our thing. It was like, you know, we started texting a lot for a few weeks, and
it was for a week.
Okay, for a week.
Don't play me.
When we were at the talking stage where it was like, okay, there's like a lot of flirting, but there's no, you know, profession of emotion or intent. I enjoyed talking to you during that time for sure. And then when 10 p.m. came around, it was like, all right, yeah, I'll talk to you tomorrow.
I don't even think we was that formal. We just stopped.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was in my own head.
Oh, in your head? Oh, okay. You left me on red.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Did they have red receipts back then? Anyway, But for me, and then like, my friends knew about us talking, but I was like, he hasn't said he liked me yet. He likes me yet. So like, I don't know if he talks to a handful of girls like this.
That wasn't me.
I didn't know though.
I wasn't out here.
I didn't know. And I wasn't like, oh my gosh, she's about to ask me out. Like, I wasn't assuming like, okay, this is what's going to happen next. Like, all I know is what you tell me. And if you haven't said that you like me, then you don't like me. Now, also, I wasn't assuming that you don't like me because you didn't say, hey, I only see you as a friend, sis. Like, it wasn't any of that. I wasn't assuming that you didn't like me. So that's the first thing, is not to assume anything, what's being, said or not said. Like, if this is going to the next level, if you want it to go to the next level, that needs to be said, needs to be stated. Clear as day. I like you. I want to get to know you better. I've been enjoying talking to you, that type of stuff. The second thing that helps me guard my heart, because you guys know I went through heartbreak, I went through disappointment before Christ, and that actually led me to Christ, and it was very significant, very devastating for me because I made a lot of poor decisions as a teenager dating.
Yeah, and if you don't know that, you can actually check out Pauline's testimony video if you want to hear more about that.
And I'm very passionate about boundaries and like teens dating, and not because it hasn't worked out for people, because obviously it has, and I'm not saying that it can't work. I'm just saying it usually doesn't, or it usually
exceptions
doesn't well
to the rule.
Yeah, and like there are ways to do it for sure, but you need very godly parents, and a lot of parents are not heavily involved in their teens dating experience. Anyway, that's why I'm very passionate about it. But anyway, the second thing that helped me, because like I said, I went through heartbreak and I was like, Lord, I'm not doing this again. I am not going to play myself again. The second thing that I did to not play myself, by the wisdom of the Holy Spirit, was not making major decisions alone. So obviously there's a bunch of milestones within the dating period. When you first start talking, when you decide to start going on dates, when you become exclusive, as in like boyfriend, girlfriend, we're together, we're in a relationship. And then I would say the next one would be when you are starting to see like, is this somebody that I could see myself marrying? And then you guys start having those conversations of like, do we want to marry each other? And if we do, when? And then engagement, blah, blah, blah. So, not making those major decisions alone. I'm not talking about like, not talking to a guy, hitting a guy up on your phone, or like responding or whatever. But for me, when we got to the place of like, I actually really enjoy talking to him, I could possibly, really seriously see myself dating him and being in a relationship, and spending more intentional time together, this going to the next level. That's when I started to involve other people. Now for me, people were already involved from the beginning just because of how we met, or like how we were interested in each other, but not making those decisions alone of like, okay, could I see myself dating him, could I see myself marrying him, asking for feedback from friends, and then also people who were like mentors and leaders in my life, getting feedback from them. Now I'm not saying like I'm doing what they're telling me to do. What should I do? Give me instructions, because they're not God.
How should I text back?
Right. It's more of like talking to the Lord first about it. Hey, God, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I want. What do you want? Do you want this for me? Confirm it for me. Show me in your word. Show me through people. And then when people are giving me feedback, if their feedback is aligning with what I'm believing the Lord is telling me, and then also what I also want for myself, that's how it kind of was involved for me.
But what about people who they feel like they're hearing something from God, but it probably isn't God, and then other people are telling them this isn't God? Like,
yeah, I mean, it all goes back to like the people who you're asking for feedback for. Now, I'm not talking about people who are walking up to you in the middle of the street like, hey, you got a boyfriend, that's not it, that's not God, or your aunt, or people who you don't respect their own relationship with God, and you haven't asked for their feedback, and you haven't given them like, hey, this is what I'm going through right now, what do you think about it? That's different. Now, if you're going out of your way to people that you respect and that you trust and that you've invited them into your process, and you don't like what you're hearing, that's on you, because you invited them into the process. Like it's another thing to you can't ask for somebody's advice. That's like, oh, do you like my shirt? And then I'm like, no, I don't like it. Well, then why did you ask me? Like, if you're not going to listen to what they have to say, then you have to ask yourself, why did you invite them into your life and into your process in that way? And I'm not saying that you automatically do whatever they say if they're telling you go and you don't want to go, or stop and you don't want to stop. It's cause for a pause though. It's going to slow you down a little bit, and there's nothing wrong with that. And like kind of getting more in their head, like, all right, cool, help me understand why you see it that way. What am I missing? What would you do if you were me? Because I really believe the role of mentors and leaders is to give you perspective. They're not supposed to give you instruction. Instruction comes from the Lord. So if they are seeing things differently, if they think, I wouldn't continue to date him if I were you, or I wouldn't date right now in this stage of my life if I were you, help me to see why, help me to understand why, and continually kind of like taking that back to the Lord until you kind of come to a place of peace and of rest.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that I did to help guard my heart, the first thing was not to assume anything. And the second thing was not to make major decisions alone. And then the third thing was to keep an open hand until the wedding day. The wedding day is when you close it shut and you're like, this is mine, this is my spouse, we're in it for life. I know that can be really, really hard to do if you are engaged, but that can really guard your heart, because people do have broken engagements. And I think that at this stage in life, I don't know how old everybody is watching, of course, or listening, but I think if you're halfway through your 20s, 30s, if you're in your 40s and 50s, you definitely know people who have gotten engaged and didn't make it down the aisle, and it was for their good. And I think that it's very kind of naive. And if you're younger, you can think like, oh yeah, once we get engaged, like that's it. And like in American culture, a lot of times people think they kind of made it when they get engaged, start living together, all that stuff. Like that's when you're engaged, you're engaged. Like engagement is to be respected, and it is to be taken seriously, and it is not something, it's not a stage you live in. You don't get engaged and stay engaged for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. But engagement is like your last lap until you enter into marriage, but you can still get out, and you're having more serious conversations, and things are getting real, and a lot of times you're seeing things for the first time, especially when it comes to family and finances and future and all those things. I didn't even mean to say all those F's, but I did. But I think keeping an open hand throughout the relationship, like those major levels that we talked about a few minutes ago, it can be very easy and very tempting with every level you progress in to feel like this is mine, this is my boyfriend, this is my fiance. Oh, well, now we do this. Well, now everybody knows about us being together. We're exclusive now. It has to work out. And we're just removing that pressure. And if that means for you, like not posting on social media until you get engaged or until you get married, like who cares? Like whatever you need to do to keep an open heart and an open hand to the Lord is gonna protect you, because God is still speaking to you at every single stage of that relationship. And sometimes you're not able to see things until a certain level, and sometimes it's honestly a test, because what you don't want to do is make an idol out of marriage, and you are like, oh, I got my ring, like we're good, like I'm good, and I just can't wait till the wedding day, just can't wait until we're married. And if you're shutting God out of that because you've reached this certain status, God is supposed to go with you into each level of that relationship. So if you don't keep an open hand and open ears, and you are holding on so tightly, sometimes the Lord wants you to let it go because he's trying to bring something better or add on to what you already have. And if your hand is so tight, like that's what I think about when you think about this analogy of keeping an open hand. If your hand is so tight, God can't take away, but he also can't add. And it doesn't always mean taking away your partner or the person that you're with. Sometimes it means moving them around in a different place. Sometimes it means adding on to what you have or taking away a little bit of what's in their heart or what's in your situation. So you just always want to have an open hand with your relationship. That was very helpful to me. Like I used to pray often, like, Lord, if this is your will, let it happen. But if it's not, take it away. Like, I don't want to go down this aisle with this person if it's not for you. And we didn't even have any major, issues going on, but I still wanted to make sure, because I idolized relationships so much prior to Christ, I knew that was a area of weakness and vulnerability for me. So I wanted to make sure that I was constantly inviting God in at every stage.
Yeah. Good stuff. I'm glad you shared that. Now, for those who are single and you are having a hard time guarding your hope, some days you're in a great place. Some days you're like, being single is just the worst thing ever. We want to address that. Let me just say, there's some people who are watching this who you love being single. There's no issues with you being single. We're not talking to you there. And by no means do we think every person who's single feels this way. But we know enough people who do feel this way and have expressed it to us that we want to just provide some encouragement in that area.
Yeah.
And if you are somebody who struggles with the hope that comes with, will I get into a relationship one day? Will I find somebody who I'm actually attracted to or actually like? A couple things that I want to say, but they all fall into this bucket of being honest with yourself. Mm-hmm. Because if you have to ask yourself, are you putting yourself in situations that may trigger you to be sad or be hopeless, whatever the right word is? And in order to answer that question, you really got to sit with yourself and take some inventory of your life and evaluate, okay, what does trigger me to feel hopeless in my singleness? As we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, Valentine's Day just passed. Mm-hmm. If you know Valentine's Day is a day that makes you sad, stay off social media that day.
Yeah.
Don't watch the movie Valentine's Day. Like, there's so many practical things that you can do. Now, obviously, there is an onslaught when it comes to Valentine's Day specifically, and you're going to hear about it. Like, I'm not saying close your ears and your eyes and act like the world isn't moving, but don't unnecessarily put yourself into situations where you're seeing things that are causing you to feel some type of way. I'll also say another practical thing that's small but could make a big difference is maybe you need to intentionally find some friends who are single. Like, maybe you're in a situation where you have a bunch of friends in a relationship and you don't have any. By no means am I saying cut those people off or don't be friends with them anymore. But there is value to being friends with people in the same season as you. Mm-hmm. Pauline and I are parents, as some of you all know. It's valuable to have people who aren't parents. And then it's very valuable to have people who are parents as well, because there's just a relatability there that makes it easier to go through some of the challenges that bring whatever season of life you're in. So maybe you're in a situation where you're like, all my friends are in a relationship. That definitely could make you feel some type of way. Like, if you're the only one who's not in a relationship, especially when maybe there's a person who was also single with you and y'all was like the two single people for a while, and then they find somebody and now you're the only one. It's like, bruh, at least I had somebody before. So whether it's finding people at a small group at your church or going to different events and putting yourself out there, doing something intentionally that can help put you in a situation to meet somebody new, just as a friend, that could be helpful to you. And the last thing is, maybe you should babysit a married couple who has kids, just to give you a fresh reality check. Every season has its challenges. I know when Pauline and I were believing for God to bring us a house, that's one thing we tried to do often, because we were in a small apartment.
900 square feet.
Less than that. 841.
Excuse me.
And give me credit for all the inches I didn't have. but we had to constantly try to remind ourselves that owning a home was not the end all be all. Yeah. Owning a home had its own challenges that we didn't have in an apartment. And we talk about that now, trying to clean up after these kids we have that we're grateful for. But at the apartment, there's much less things to have to clean up because there's much less space.
You don't even have like a huge house or big house.
Now it take an hour to clean up.
Yeah, there's more kids too. Josh has been.
I don't care, man. It took a long time. The whole point is that we had to remind ourselves that even though we did not like the situation we were in, like we might have disliked living in that apartment just as much as some people dislike being single. Like, as much as we didn't like it, we had to remind ourselves and give ourselves reason to be grateful for the season that we're in. Yeah. So you're single, there's a reason you can be grateful that the Lord has you in that stage for whatever reason. There's one thing that you can think of that you can be grateful of. And then there's also a lot of things that you could think of, like, yeah, if I was in a relationship right now, like, there's some challenges that definitely would come with that. Whether you know that or you don't know that. Because their family could be crazy. You just don't know. And a verse that I want to share that was super helpful for me when we were waiting for God to bless us with the home, because we were waiting years for that. And this verse really helped me, especially when I did feel like God was saying, all right, I am going to bless you at home. But we weren't in the home yet, and it was kind of that waiting season, was Hebrews 11:6. And it says, it is impossible to please God without faith. Anyone who wants to come to him must believe that God exists and that he rewards those who sincerely seek him. It's that last part that was really key for me. God exists and he rewards those who sincerely seek him. He's not just a God that's just sitting back and watching you. He's actually looking for ways to bless you if you come to him in faith, if you sincerely seek him with all your heart. And by no means am I sitting here saying that he's going to reward you with a husband or reward you with a wife. But it does say he's going to reward you with something. And that can give you peace knowing that God is for you. Because I think sometimes it can be easy to think that God has forgotten you or God isn't with you. And God is very much for you and very much with you. And as you continue to seek him, he'll show you that in whatever way he wants to. Because at the end of the day, he's Lord, so he can do what he wants. But he does care for you. The Bible says that. Cast your cares to God because he cares for you. And I think it's just important to remember that, because I think it can get really easy for the enemy to try to make us think that God's forgotten us when we get in situations where we've been waiting for a long time.
Yes, sir.
Anything else?
So good.
Anything else?
No.
Yeah. So we hope you were encouraged. We hope that we helped you have some more hope if you were feeling hopeless in your single season. And we hope that we gave you some practical keys for those who are dating. Don't just be out here spilling all your beans, spilling all your guts to people who have not shown you that they are worthy or able to handle that type of information.
Right.
We'll see you next week on the W Podcast.
Bye.
I know you were worried. I can still see the red.
I know, that's why I didn't say
giraffe
anything.
neck. I was trying to get you to like not say something. Can you make a thumbnail for this, please?
Yes.
Thanks for watching this video.
To get more Christian relationship advice, subscribe to our channel.
And make sure you check out our other videos as well.